So I bought this new table saw. Doesn't it look cool? Anyways, I'm putting a new blade on it because the one that came with it wasn't that great. It's the rigid. It's a hybrid table saw, the rigid hybrid table saw. Anyways, so I decided I wanted to make a sled for it and just want to make it out of scrap. So here's a old piece of scrap. See that sled that I made for another saw, another rigid saw, and it still fits barely. Amazingly, it has the same dimensions. Anyways, I'm cutting off stuff to make it square, but I want to make a better one. So this one, I'm cutting the fence. I'm making cutting thin pieces to make a fence. Then I'm going to glue them together. Anyways, making sure everything's square. So I use plywood, 3/4 inch plywood. This is sanded pine. It's not birch. The pine's cheaper than the birch. I think it's just as good. There's my silicone brush my brother gave me to spread glue. I think it's okay. Works. Doesn't get my fingers all super, but your finger works too. Anyways, I'm gonna stack layers, and with a specific, I'm looking for a specific grain, or if you could call it grain. And I'm trying to use the table saw table part because it's really flat. And then here, this is a extruded aluminum piece, and it's really flat. And so I'm essentially flattening them out while I glue them by clamping it to that part. But glue got all over my table, so this was a bad idea as far as not having something between the work and the table. Don't get glue on your table saw. So I'm taking it off, gonna glue the next piece up. It's still part of the back fence, so I have that piece. Now I'm cleaning up the glue splatter. Glue those two pieces together, and again, I'm trying to get them as flat as possible. So I'm using my extruded aluminum piece to make them as flat as possible. There's the orientation I want to glue them together in. Basically, you'll see that I just use a lot of glue. I'm trying not to use fasteners, nails, screws, anything like that. Just I want to see if I can do it. That's the main reason. So just lots of glue, lots of clamping, and I don't have that many clamps, so. So now I'm unclamping it after it's dried. See, there's glue all over the table. I should have not done that. Now I'm cleaning the edges that has glue spilled out, so I'm going to run them through the table saw and just shave the glue and just a little bit off to make it flat, perfectly flat and parallel with each other. And then I'm cleaning the top and bottom off of this as well. Again, where the glue came out, just to make it completely flat. And because they move, when you glue them together, they all move a little bit. Even no matter how hard you try, they're still not perfectly aligned. So I think I get a little smarter with this one. And I bring out something to cover my table saw top. Should have done this at the beginning. And you're going to see in a minute, but I mess up. And I try to, when I clamp it together, I try to get it perfectly aligned. But it ends up not being flat against the faces, as flat as I want it to be. So here I'm clamping it up, and then I realize while I continue to clamp it, I have to flip it over to use my clamp. Anyways, right about here I realize I'm hitting it because I realize it's not. So I unclamp it, I break it apart. It made like in a couple minutes, the glue I couldn't move them anymore. It was amazing how fast it set. Anyway, so I take it apart and re-glue it. So there it is, re-glued. It's still not perfect, but I decide I'm gonna fix that later. So now I'm gonna put dowels between those two major pieces instead of screws or nails. I just thought, maybe I'll put some dowels here. That goes through all of it. It doesn't go completely through, but it goes through most of it. So I'm gonna cut the dowels 3/4 inch. And who knows if this does anything. I'm hoping it holds them together better. So now I'm going to clean that part up. I'm going to cut the dowels off. See, make it flat. And then I also cut off the side that didn't line up right. That's what this is for. And luckily my saw blade is big enough. So this part, it's the bottom. So now it's flat. That's how I fixed my glue up. Now I'm going to put the fancy chamfer on the corner so that it doesn't catch sawdust. I don't know if I liked doing this afterwards, but I did it. See? Now I'm going to cut. Now I'm going to cut runners. And this is actually the second try doing this. The first try I did it with hardwood, and the hardwood eventually bent up. Oh wait, I decided to. This is the front. These two pieces, I didn't have enough to make them the same size, but I still wanted one of them to be tall. So that's why one is tall and one is short. I figured I still wanted the thickness, but I wanted the height as well. And I'm just using scrap. So this doesn't have to be perfect, which is good because it's not. So again, I'm cutting the runners, and it's the second time I've done this. First time I used hardwood, and it moved. Like after I cut it and it was perfect, like the next day it had bent on its own from the stresses, and so I decided to use plywood so that it will always stay straight. This is 1/2 inch rough plywood. And here's the base from a scrap piece. So I get a bunch of pennies, and I do the old penny trick, stacking the pennies in the grooves so that your runners stand proud of the bottom or of the top of your table. You want them to stick up a little. So I stacked, I think it was like four pennies high. And then I put wood glue. Try not to put too much or it'll smear all over your tabletop. Then I try to put it on as straight as possible, and then I just wait it. That's how I hold it. And then wait until it dries. And then I have this other idea to put, do I do it? It works. Got to try it out. So anyways, now I decide I want to put dowels instead of using screws. A lot of people put screws here, but I decided to put dowels. So I went and bought a thin, I can't remember, I think it's 1/4 inch. The other ones were 1/2 inch, but this one I think I got a 1/4 inch dowels, or a rod, wooden rod, pine. So I'm not Or I am trying to. No, I'm not. I'm trying not to go all the way through. But you'll see in a minute. So I cut all my dowels. You'll see in a minute that I did punch through the the top of the. I punched through the other side a couple times. The plywood gave out. But anyways, the dowels hopefully are better than the screws. Who knows? So I tried, you'll see, but I tried to use dowels pretty much everywhere that you would use a fastener. I mean, I think over the long run, a glued in dowel is going to hold longer and won't come loose. A screw will come loose over time. I mean, it might be a long time, but it'll come loose eventually. And that's why I'm kind of trying not to. Plus, I want to try something new. So now I'm putting the front on. This one doesn't have to be straight. I mean, you want to get it as straight as possible. I just lined it up with the edge. But it doesn't have to be like 90 degrees or anything from the saw blade. And again, so I glued it, and then I put screws to hold it. And then while the screws are in, I'm going to put, I think I just put, well, let's watch. 1, 2. All right, so then I wait. And then I take the 3 screws out, and I fill those holes with dowels. So I ended up putting 5 total, but so I used screws to hold it down while the glue dried, and then I put dowels in later. Now I'm cutting because all the dowels are proud, so I can cut them off. Cut them all off, and then just sand the heck out of it to get rid of the dowels being proud, so that everything's smooth. So that part's done. Now to put this back guy on. In order to put it on, you got to raise the blade up. Or do I do something different? Oh yeah, so if you look, all the points where the dowels punch through the top surface. And I think at this point I came up to I was coming up to a day where I wouldn't do anything on it. Can you see them? Here's a good picture. The dowel popped all the way, it pushed the wood out of the way and it popped through. So I'm gonna have to do something about that first. Well, no, maybe I don't do it first. Anyways, I'm gonna cut them flush first and just try to get everything flat-ish. So to bring the saw up, you have to remove the splitter. Otherwise, it won't work. Now I'm turning the saw on and spinning the blade up. I'm not cutting all the way through, but I need the line. So I'm going to turn it off, lower the blade, and try to get this sucker on as square as possible using a framing square. And then I'm going to clamp it. That's what I'm doing right now. And then after I clamp it, I'm going to put 2 screws, one on either end. So now I've come back. I had a day, and so I decided to fill in these gaps, let them dry. So I use up the rest of the glue I had in the bottle, and I want to put sawdust in there to see if it works. I don't know. I'm not. I think this is the second time I've tried this, and it really hasn't worked out for me. Maybe I'm doing it wrong, but mixing wood glue with sawdust doesn't make an amazing filler, wood filler. But that's what I do. I mean, it's filled the hole, but it's more utilitarian than it is nice looking. So now it's dried, and I'm trying to clean it up. So I start sanding it. I let it dry for like a day, like more than 24 hours. Bunch of sanding to get it good. That's a rasp. I think it's a bastard file. Anyways, sand, trying to get it flat. Then I decided to go back to the fence, make it as square as possible. So this is actually the third time I'm doing this. First, you have to use a piece that's big enough. That was my first mistake. Anyways, so I'm going to do 5 cuts on this thick sucker. And the 5th cut, I'm going to measure. You can look online. There's a bunch of people that describe it better than I do, how this works. But essentially you make 4 cuts, and then your 5th cut you make it thicker. And then you measure the difference. So I'm marking one end so I remember which side's which, because that determines which way you move your fence. So now I'm going to measure the thicknesses of the cut and differences. See how you can look at my piece of wood down there that I wrote. That's all my messed up chances before. So I'm measuring with my calipers. Calipers are, I mean, they show that they go out to 4 decimal places in inches. I mean, that really they're only good out to 3, but hey. So then I have to do math on my phone, which I'm using to videotape this. So in a second, I'll turn my phone off, do my math, and then turn the camera back on. There it is. Did the math. And so I find the difference, divide by 4, and then that's how much you have to move your fence. Yeah, I had to really think about which direction to move it. But I did find something, because my thickness gauges are at work. So I found something that was close. It was actually a little thicker than what I calculated, but I think, I thought that was better. So essentially I'm moving it, the fence, one side of it, I'm moving it the thickness of what I just measured, or 28 thousandths of an inch. I'm moving it. So you get a reference point, which is my square, and I clamp my square to the table. I clamp it against the fence and then onto the table thing so it doesn't move. And then I release my fence, the screw, I take it out, and then I put the spacer piece in between the two of them. And then so here I'm trying to figure out, make sure I'm going the right direction. Anyways, and then I put the screw in a different hole. So you move over a little bit and you screw it in a different hole. And then you take it all off and you do it again. So now I'm going to do the 5 cut method again. Then I'm going to measure everything. Again, mark. And I did this more than this. I mean, so here I show you magic math. There's the 2 lengths. Now I did the math magically, and I got to move it 3. Now I'm at 3.5 thousandths of an inch off. So I find a piece of paper that's that thickness, It's actually a little bit bigger. Or is it? Let me see. What does my caliper say? Pretty close. So I decided, so now I'm moving at a thickness of a piece of paper. So again, you put a reference, you bolt the reference down, or you clamp the reference down, you move it by that much, and you have to put you have to put the screw in a different hole. So you make a new hole for it. Then you do it again to check it. Do some more measuring. This is the third time I'm measuring this that I'm showing you on camera. Actually, again, I did it a couple times before I really figured out how to do the process, which is fine. You can make as many mistakes as you want. There's not like a limit of how many times you can do this. In fact, the more times you do this, the more iterations you do this process, the better it gets. So there's my differences. I decide to do it again to make sure that, see if my numbers match before I move the fence. And I guess that piece of wood's getting smaller and smaller. But anyways, there's the two differences between the two sides. And then, do I show you the math? Maybe not. Anyways, you saw what the two numbers were. Then I figured it was good enough for me. I look at my square, and it's pretty dang square enough for me. So now I take paste wax. Oh no, before that. So now I'm gonna drill. Now I'm gonna set that fence, and I could screw it down, but I decided to put dowels. The only problem with dowels is you have to wait for it to dry. So I put a whole bunch of dowels in it so it doesn't move. Remember, this is not, the face of them, it is not glued to the face. So the only thing that's glued is the dowels. So I do a whole bunch of dowels, more than normal. So now it's just dowels, no screws at all. Sand it down, of course. And then I'm going to sand all of it to get it real smooth and cleaned up. And now I do paste wax to make it slide even better. There you go. That stuff. It's in the paint section of Home Depot or Lowe's. Cover it all up. It's all good. Of course, you got to try it out. It slides a lot. I mean, this is sped up, but it slides really well. Without wiggle. No wiggle. So now, I'm going to just show you what it looks like. Nice straight fence. Which was the main thing, is get a straight fence that's not going to move later on. So I think I want to explain this, the reason why I did it like this. And essentially, I'm trying to make this face as flat as possible across the whole length, right? And plywood in this direction or in this direction, you know, across the grain of the plywood, right? They're alternating layers of wood, right? It doesn't want to, I mean, first of all, it doesn't want to expand and contract in this direction. It'll expand and contract in this direction with moisture. Same with this. It'll expand and contract this direction, but not this direction. But this line here, and of course this edge, both these edges, this whole edge right here, it doesn't want to bend. So here, let me show this little guy. So obviously this is thinner, but if you can see, plywood will bend this way, even the 3/4 inch stuff, right? But if I turn it this way, I can't, it'll stay, this line will stay straight. It won't bend in or out. Over time with moisture, it'll stay, this will stay straight, whereas this will bend. And so even though, like, the more layers you do, the less it's going to bend. But I wanted this side to not bend in that direction. Or here, let me move the camera. Maybe move it up. So, little focus. So I didn't want it to bend, you know, an exaggerated bend would be like this. I mean, it would be very minuscule. It'd be hard to see, but I wanted this to remain as flat as possible. But at the same time, I wanted the nice face that this provides. So I still wanted to use this as the face, right? But I'm trying to reduce the bending. And so the best way I could think of, do another focus. So the best way is to put this piece right here. So this is going to resist it from bending. It'll keep this flat and straight as long as it's glued to it. So that's why I did this. It's probably overkill, but I figured that's, you know, I want to try it, see if it works. Anyways, that's my, there it is. Let me focus it. So there's my big table. Also, that's, I guess, with the plywood runners, I did plywood runners as well. And I made sure that they're in this direction so that over time, it wouldn't expand this way. It would stay the same. And also it wouldn't curve in those directions. And then the one way it will bend, it's glued to this, you know, it's glued to the bottom, and so that'll keep it from bending. So that's why I did plywood runners instead of solid hardwood. Thanks for watching.